Have you ever watched your child disappear right before your eyes? Not physically, but emotionally, where they're sitting right there, but they're not really there anymore. What I'm about to share with you proves that sometimes the most expensive solutions fail, while the simplest approach can work miracles. This wasn't about the $500 per hour specialists with their advanced degrees. I've researched hundreds of cases of selective mutism in children, and this story reveals something profound about human connection. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes a child just needs someone who truly sees them, and how one woman's simple approach succeeded where 5 specialists failed. Little Emma went from complete silence for 8 months to laughing and calling someone mama for the first time since her mother's death, proving that love and patience can heal what money and credentials cannot. If you skip this story, you'll miss the moment that shows why connection matters more than certification. Here's what happened. Richard Morrison stood in his mansion's marble foyer, watching his 7-year-old daughter Emma sit motionless on the imported Italian leather sofa. 8 months ago, she had been a chattering, laughing little girl who filled their home with joy. 8 months ago, before the accident that took her mother's life and Emma's voice along with it. The tech billionaire had built an empire by solving impossible problems, but his daughter's silence had defeated every solution money could buy. Their Malibu mansion worth $12 million felt like a mausoleum. Emma moved through the halls like a ghost, ignoring the expensive toys that filled her bedroom, the state-of-the-art playground in the backyard, and most heartbreakingly ignoring him. She hasn't spoken a single word since the funeral, Richard had explained to Dr. Patricia Wells during their first consultation 3 months ago. Dr. Wells charged $500 per hour and came highly recommended by every wealthy family in Los Angeles. Her Beverly Hills office was filled with the latest therapeutic equipment, advanced play therapy tools, and walls lined with degrees from prestigious universities. Selective mutism following trauma is complex, Dr. Wells had explained, setting up her expensive biofeedback machines and specialized toys. We'll use evidence-based play therapy techniques combined with systematic desensitization protocols. For 3 months, Emma sat silently through sessions while Dr. Wells manipulated expensive therapeutic puppets and tried every technique in her arsenal. The bills mounted $15,000 per month, but Emma only withdrew further. She would curl up in the corner of the office, staring at the wall, while ignoring the doctor's attempts at engagement. Desperate, Richard consulted Dr. Michael Chen, a trauma specialist who charged even more. Dr. Chen brought EMDR therapy protocols and high-tech biofeedback systems that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The child is displaying classic symptoms of complicated grief with selective mutism, Dr. Chen announced, adjusting his expensive equipment. We'll need to process the traumatic memories using cutting-edge neurofeedback technology. 2 months of sessions with Dr. Chen yielded nothing but higher bills and a daughter who had started hiding under her bed whenever therapy was mentioned. Emma began covering her ears when the high-tech machines beeped and buzzed, pressing herself into corners like a frightened animal. Darcera Robinson, the selective mutism expert flown in from New York, lasted exactly 1 month. She arrived with behavioral modification programs and pharmaceutical consultation recommendations, turning Emma's playroom into what looked like a laboratory. The child needs structured behavioral interventions, Dr. Robinson declared, setting up charts and reward systems. We'll implement a comprehensive treatment protocol targeting vocal production through systematic reinforcement. Emma's response was to stop eating. She would take one look at the charts and behavior modification equipment and shake her head violently, tears streaming down her face. Finally, in desperation, Richard assembled a team approach. Dr. Wells, Dr. Chen, and Dr. Robinson would coordinate their efforts, holding weekly case conferences to discuss Emma's lack of progress. The specialists spent more time talking to each other than to Emma analyzing her behaviors like she was a fascinating puzzle rather than a heartbroken little girl. We need to consider residential treatment, Dr. Wells suggested during their final team meeting. The child is clearly resistant to outpatient intervention. Richard stared at the bill in his hands, $47,000 for 6 months of therapy that had made his daughter worse. Emma now spent most of her time hiding in her walk-in closet, surrounded by expensive clothes she never wore, clutching a worn photograph of her mother. The mansion's silence was deafening. Their Filipino housekeeper, Maria, had quit the previous week, tearfully explaining that she couldn't bear watching Emma disappear before their eyes. "She needs help beyond my training, Mr. Morrison," Maria had said, packing her belongings. "But maybe not the kind those doctors are giving." That night, Richard found Emma in her closet again, sleeping on the floor, next to a drawing she had hidden under her bed. The crayon picture showed a little girl alone in a big house, with dark scribbles covering the sky. At the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Where is Mama?" Richard's heart shattered as he realized that all his money, all the specialists, all the advanced equipment had missed the most important thing. Emma wasn't just traumatized, she was lost. And none of the experts seemed to understand that sometimes a child doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be found. The next morning, Richard made a decision that went against everything the specialists had recommended. He was going to try a completely different approach. The community center in downtown Los Angeles was a far cry from the pristine Beverly Hills offices Richard had grown accustomed to visiting. The building needed paint, the furniture was mismatched, and the waiting area smelled faintly of coffee and children's snacks. But when Richard called, asking for help, the receptionist had immediately connected him with Maya Williams. "I'm not a specialist in selective mutism," Maya had warned him over the phone. "I'm a licensed therapist, but I work mostly with kids in foster care and families going through crisis. Are you sure you want someone without those fancy credentials?" Maya Williams was 34 years old, had grown up bouncing between foster homes, and understood abandonment in ways that couldn't be taught in graduate school. She carried herself with quiet confidence, dressed professionally, but practically, and had kind eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense to truth. When she arrived at the Morrison mansion, Richard immediately noticed the difference. While the previous therapists had brought cases full of equipment and immediately started setting up their materials, Maya simply stood in the foyer and observed. "This is a beautiful home," she said softly, taking in the marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and expensive art. "But it feels very quiet. Where does Emma like to spend her time?" Richard led her to Emma's playroom, where thousands of dollars worth of untouched toys sat gathering dust. Expensive therapy equipment from previous sessions was stacked in corners, biofeedback machines, behavior charts, and sophisticated play therapy tools that Emma had refused to engage with. Emma was in her usual spot, sitting behind the largest piece of equipment, Dr. Chen's abandoned neurofeedback machine, making herself as small as possible. She wore her favorite blue Superman pajamas, the ones she had been wearing almost every day since her mother's death, because they were soft and comforting. Maya didn't approach Emma or try to coax her out. Instead, she sat down on the carpeted floor about 6 feet away and simply pulled a small sketch pad and crayons from her simple canvas bag. "I hope you don't mind if I draw while I'm here," Maya said, not looking directly at Emma, but speaking in a gentle conversational tone. "I always think better when my hands are busy." For the next 45 minutes, Maya drew quietly while Emma watched from behind the machine. Maya didn't try to engage Emma in conversation or ask her questions. She didn't set up any equipment or explain any therapeutic techniques. She simply drew pictures, a tree, a house, a cat sleeping in the sun. Then, as the session was ending, Maya drew something different. A little girl sitting alone in a very big house. The girl in the drawing looked small and sad, dwarfed by all the empty space around her. Emma's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time in months, she moved. She crept a little closer, still hidden, but clearly interested in what Maya was drawing. "Sometimes," Maya said softly, still not looking directly at Emma, "little girls feel very small when big changes happen in their lives." Richard watched from the doorway, holding his breath. It was the first time Emma had shown interest in anything an adult was doing since the accident. The following week, Maya returned with the same simple approach. She sat in the same spot and drew, while Emma watched. This time, Emma emerged from behind the machine, entirely sitting on the floor, about 4 feet away, close enough to see the drawings clearly. Maya was sketching a family of birds in a nest when Emma suddenly stood up and walked to her art desk in the corner. She returned with a single crayon purple, her mother's favorite color, and sat down next to Maya. Purple is a beautiful color, Maya observed as Emma began to draw her own picture. It's the color of royalty and magic. Emma drew a small purple flower next to Maya's birds. It was the first creative act she had engaged in since losing her mother. By the third week, Emma was actively participating in their drawing sessions. She would sit right next to Maya, their shoulders almost touching, working on her own pictures, while Maya drew nearby. The expensive therapy equipment remained untouched in the corners, but the simple art supplies were getting plenty of use. Maya began to notice patterns in Emma's artwork. The little girl consistently drew pictures of herself, looking small and alone, but she also drew beautiful detailed pictures of a woman with long dark hair who was always smiling. In every picture, the woman was reaching toward Emma, but never quite touching. "These pictures of the lady are beautiful," Maya said one afternoon, examining Emma's latest drawing. "She looks very loving." Emma nodded enthusiastically for the first time in months, pointing to the woman in the picture, and then to a framed photograph on her desk, her mother. "That's your mama," Maya said gently. "You can see how much she loved you just by looking at her smile." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded again. Then in a moment that made Richard's heart stop, Emma whispered her first word in 8 months. "Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart," Maya replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "Your mama. You miss her so much, don't you?" Emma nodded, tears flowing freely now, and whispered, "Where did she go?" Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a simple composition notebook and glue stick. "What if we made a special book about your mama? A book where she could always be with you, where you could visit her whenever you wanted." Emma looked at the plain notebook, then at her pictures scattered around them, then back at Maya's face. For the first time since the accident, she smiled. Richard had to step away from the doorway because his own tears were falling too hard to see clearly. In 6 weeks, this woman, with her simple art supplies and genuine heart, had accomplished what 6 months of expensive specialists could not. Emma was beginning to come back to life. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Maya was driving to the Morrison mansion for Emma's 8th session. Dr. Patricia Wells's voice was sharp with professional concern and barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Bay Morrison, I feel compelled to warn you about this unqualified approach you're taking with Emma," Dr. Wells said. "This woman has no specialized training in selective mutism. You're wasting precious time when Emma needs evidence-based treatment from certified specialists." Richard held the phone away from his ear as Dr. Wells continued her lecture about proper protocols and the dangers of untrained intervention. Meanwhile, he could hear Emma's laughter coming from the playroom, actual laughter, for the first time in 8 months. Dr. Chen called an hour later with similar concerns. "The child needs structured therapeutic intervention, not arts and crafts," he insisted. "You're setting her back by abandoning scientifically proven methods." By afternoon, Richard's sister Patricia had called from New York. "Richard, I'm worried about you. Everyone says you've hired some community center worker instead of real doctors. Emma needs the best specialist money can buy, not some woman with a crayon box." The pressure mounted throughout the week. Richard's wealthy friends, all of whom had used the same expensive specialists for their own children's problems, began questioning his judgment. The school counselor called to express concern about unconventional treatment approaches. Even his assistant suggested returning to proper medical professionals. Standing in his home office, Richard stared at the bills from Emma's previous treatments, nearly $50,000 for 6 months of therapy that had made his daughter worse. Then he looked through the window at Emma and Maya in the garden, working together on what Maya called Emma's memory book. When Maya arrived for their next session, Richard couldn't hide his uncertainty. "Maya, everyone is telling me this isn't enough," he said quietly. "They say Emma needs real specialists, not just drawing." Maya looked at him with understanding rather than defensiveness. "Mr. Morrison, what do you see when you look at Emma now, compared to 6 weeks ago?" Richard followed her gaze to where Emma was sitting at her art table, carefully pasting a photograph of her mother into the handmade book. Emma was humming softly, something she used to do before the accident. But what if they're right? Richard pressed. What if I'm failing her by not getting the best treatment money can buy? Emma will tell you what she needs, Maya said gently, if you listen to her instead of listening to everyone else. That afternoon, Maya introduced the project that would change everything. She had brought simple construction paper, a glue stick, and colored crayons, materials worth less than $10 total. Emma, what if we made your memory book extra special today? Maya suggested. What if we made a page about all the ways your mama is still with you? Emma's eyes lit up with interest. She had been working on the memory book for 2 weeks now, filling it with photographs, drawings, and even some of her mother's jewelry that Richard had given her permission to include. Maya helped Emma select photos showing her mother reading bedtime stories, baking cookies, pushing Emma on the swing set. As they worked, Maya asked gentle questions about the memories associated with each picture. What was your favorite thing about story time with Mama? Maya asked. She made funny voices for all the characters. Emma whispered, her voice growing stronger each day. And she always said I was her favorite little girl in the whole world. She still thinks that, Maya said softly. Love doesn't stop even when people go to heaven. Emma looked up from her gluing with sudden understanding in her eyes. Really, Mama still loves me, even though she's gone. Oh, sweetheart, yes. And she would want you to be happy and to let other people love you too. Emma worked quietly for several minutes, adding her own drawings to complement the photographs. Then she drew something new, a picture of herself standing between two women. One woman had long dark hair and angel wings, clearly her mother in heaven. The other woman had shorter hair and was wearing blue clothes like Maya always wore. At the bottom of the page, Emma wrote in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, Mama in heaven and Mama Maya. She looked up at Maya with eyes full of hope and whispered, Mama would like you. She would want you to take care of me. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she understood the magnitude of what Emma was saying. This little girl wasn't just speaking again, she was choosing to love again. Emma, Maya said, her voice gentle but clear. Would you like me to be like a mama to you here on earth, while your real mama watches over you from heaven? Emma nodded enthusiastically, and then did something that made Richard's heart soar. She ran to where he was standing in the doorway and grabbed his hand. Daddy Maya is my guardian angel mama, just like the angels who take care of people when they need help. Richard knelt down as Emma threw her arms around his neck, the first hug she had initiated since the accident. Through his tears, he looked at Maya and understood exactly what she had given his daughter permission to love without betraying her mother's memory. 3 months later, the Morrison mansion felt like a home again. Emma's laughter echoed through the halls as she raced between rooms, no longer the silent ghost who had haunted the corridors for so long. Her memory book sat proudly displayed on her nightstand, a beautiful testament to her mother's love and her own healing journey. Richard had offered Maya a position as Emma's full-time family therapist, which she had accepted with the understanding that she was now much more than an employee. Emma called her Mama Maya, and Maya had become an integral part of their small family. The transformation was remarkable. Emma attended school again, made friends, and talked openly about both her Mama in heaven and her Mama Maya on earth. The expensive therapy equipment had been donated to the community center where Maya worked, while simple art supplies had become permanent fixtures in Emma's room. Children don't need perfect solutions, Maya had explained to Richard one evening as they watched Emma playing in the garden. They need perfect love. They need someone who sees their heart, not just their problems. Richard's own transformation had been equally profound. He learned that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased, and that sometimes the best help comes from people who understand struggle rather than those who have studied it. Emma's healing taught them both that loving new people doesn't betray the memory of those we've lost. It honors them. Her mother's love lived on in Emma's capacity to trust, to hope, and to open her heart to new relationships. The memory book remained Emma's most treasured possession, proof that love transcends death and that simple acts of caring can heal even the deepest wounds. If Emma's story touched your heart and you'd like to hear more inspiring stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every week I share stories about how love and patience can heal what money and expertise cannot. Which moment resonated with you most? Was it Maya's simple approach, Emma's breakthrough, or Richard's realization about what children really need? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling with their own child's silence. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from the most qualified professional, but from someone who truly understands the heart of the problem.